So one of the things that I noticed last week, I went to the car dealership, and there's a couple of things I noticed. The first fact was that there were more cars on the lot that I've ever seen since 2020. Right? We know that the pandemic hit, and the supply chain was weak to say the least. Right? And there was a chip shortage, the whole nine yards, and you really had to go in and fight for a deal. And even then, it was like, well, this is the only car in the lot. Hopefully you like it. If not, then get off the lot. There's no reason for you to be here, right? And so I was expecting that type of environment walking into the dealership, but that soon changed. So I pull in, there's cars everywhere. People are dying to try to make a sale at this dealership. And one of the things that I kept on thinking in the back of my mind is like, the dealership doesn't have the advantage that they had a year or two ago, right? And with that being said, everything went well. The negotiations and all that was great. And then this, you went into the finance office with me. And
Hmm.
that is where things nearly fell apart. And the reason why is because extremely high interest rates, right? Especially the cookie cutter financing. They're like, hey, the GM rate is nearly 9%. So just suck it up and sign the paper, right? And you and I were like, what the
Exactly.
heck? Like, this is insane. But that situation is happening all over America in all different sectors. So I actually found a story here that I wanted to bring to you, and it's a really interesting one, right? And what it suggests is that the US might be heading for a shallow recession according to the conference board that compiles this type of data. But I wanted to read to you the main line that stuck out to me. It says elevated prices, tighter monetary policy, harder to get credit, which we know very well based on our car story, and reduced government spending are poised to dampen economic growth further. So, with that being said, Blake, let me ask you, are you seeing the signs of recession? And I think it was hilarious that they talked about slowing government spending. What do you think about the whole nine yards? Are we in a recession?
Well, it's again, like we always say on the show, it's hard to say for certainty, but there are a few things that I can say. Number one, this data, which we are discussing, is from the World Economic Forum, which is actually a traditionally pretty liberal source. And typically, we see conservative sources sometimes talk about recession, depending on who the president is. And right now, we have a liberal president. So it's easy to kind of get caught up into the, conservative ideas of, hey, look, there's a recession, right? Which they
Mm-hmm.
definitely have a point with. But I just think that the first thing is the World Economic Forum is a liberal organization, and they're putting this information out there based on one of their indexes, which it looks at how quick the economy is running, how much real estate's for sale, how many jobs there are, and they put it into this big index. And they're saying that it shrunk by 0.6% and then 0.7% actually to be at the slowest or the quickest deceleration since 2009. And so, if
Wow.
it's really truly the quickest deceleration since 2009, well, if you guys are any older than the age of 2025, you remember 2008, 2009, 2010 when the economy was,
Yeah.
let's just say, not good. High unemployment,
I think most
high
people
interest rates.
wanted to forget it, but it's something that was unforgettable.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. So, with that being said, are we seeing a modern 2009 take place, or are we seeing something else? Well, it's hard to say, but real estate, like we talked about earlier, is actually down. Or the prices are up, but the amount of inventory is down. And then at the same point in time, not only do we see that, but we're seeing job hiring slow down. It's still in the positives. We're seeing GDP decelerate. It's still in the positives, but good question. Excuse me. So, yeah, to answer your
Wow.
question,
Bless
and
you.
woo,
Wow.
all this numbers, it's making me excited. Um, But yeah, it does look like we are potentially heading into a recession if we're not in one already. The question that I have is the shallow recession like a 0.1% negative, 0.2%? Are we talking -1% GDP, -2% GDP? Because when we
Yeah.
get to that level, that's when mass unemployment starts, and that's when panic really sets in. So I wonder what level of recession we're actually going to be in.
It,
Because I think recession's
it,
inevitable.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I think that the number one factor in recession is when panic sets in because everyone grips onto their dollars a little bit harder, and that's when commerce over all sectors tends to stop, right? Auto, home, the whole nine yards, right? And people also sometimes are hesitant to keep their funds in the bank, which makes it harder to get a loan, harder to get lines of credit, as the World Economic Forum suggested. The other thing that is really interesting is stepping away from all this data. And if we just go back to the Fed's words and the chairman, Jerome Powell, well, what has he clearly indicated? He's indicating that he's looking for higher unemployment to be able to suck the dollar out of the economy. And when you're sucking all of these extra dollars out of the economy, when you're basically, in some ways clearing the floor, I guess you could say, right? Well, what's going to happen with that? Well, there's going to be less people around that have excess money to spend, meaning that again, there goes the tight grip on the finances, which will lead to a grinding halt or at least a slowdown over all of the segments. So let's not even look at the World Economic Forum. Let's look at Jerome Powell's words, right? He has insisted that he wants to get inflation down to that traditional 2% number. Well, we're still way above that. And people were celebrating a couple of months ago, like, yay, we're below 7. Yay, we're below 6. Well, that's not going to do it for Jerome Powell. And if unemployment right now is a little bit below 4%, historically decent unemployment, minus the true job market, which I mean, we could talk about in
Yeah.
another segment. But I just see things continuing to worsen. And let me ask you this, with a combination of not only this index, right, pointing this out, but with a GDP somewhere below 2%, which is forecasted right now, and with the Fed working completely against the American worker, not to
Hmm.
put you on the spot, but what are some steps that the average American can take to spare themselves some controversy when things do get rough? Because, as you said, I believe it's inevitable as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. A lot of this really goes into the blame game of who told who what. And so, when you look at like we mentioned earlier, if you look at the statistics, sometimes it's get easy to get caught up in the statistics and they paint a narrative and what it means. But if you take away the statistics away, all of them, and you start over again, what do you get? You still get people with less money in their paychecks. The consumer price index, the CPI, is still raising as I'm being attacked by my dog here, Nuggy, to think we
Yeah,
wished him a
that's
happy
wonderful.
birthday last week. And so,
I
yeah,
know.
all,
What the heck, man?
all of the prices are rising. And so, yeah, definitely, definitely hurts the consumer. Almost as much
Wow,
as
there he
Nuggy's
is. There
spice
he is.
hurts me.
Well, I was just I was just gonna say, it could take a big chunk, a ginormous chunk of the consumer out of the market for all the basics, the
It
same way
will.
that
It
Nuggie's taking
certainly
a
will.
chunk out of your hand.
Taking a chunk
Blake,
out of
thank you
my
so much for
hand.
breaking this down. I really appreciate it, and hopefully your dog will let you go. Thanks,
We'll
Blake.
see. All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.